Every event in your life has a return address. Every single one. That promotion, that breakup, that stranger who said exactly what you needed to hear, all of it traced back to something you set in motion, often without realizing it. And the pattern repeats until you see the machinery behind it. The ancient Hermetic tradition held a principle that modern psychology is only now catching up to. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. The Kybalion, a text attributed to the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, frames this as one of 7 universal laws governing reality. Thousands of years old, still operational. But this principle cuts deeper than simple physics. Drop a ball, it falls. Push a domino, the chain collapses. That version is obvious. The version that changes how you live sits one layer beneath the surface in a domain the Hermetic writers called the mental plane. Mental causation, the idea that your thoughts function as causes in the same way a physical force does. A thought arises, carries a specific quality and direction, and produces effects that ripple outward into circumstances, relationships, decisions you'll make 3 months from now without remembering where the impulse started. You felt this. You've spent a week anxious about money and watched expenses multiply as if the universe heard a request. You've entered a room already expecting hostility and found it everywhere you looked. Coincidence is the word we use when we can't see the chain. The Hermetic framework says something uncomfortable about randomness. It doesn't exist. Apparent chance is just causation operating on a plane you haven't learned to observe yet. A person walks through life believing luck determines outcomes. Good breaks, bad breaks, the randomness of being born here instead of there. The Hermetic practitioner looks at the same life and sees an unbroken sequence of mental causes producing material effects. The difference between those two perspectives determines everything about what happens next. So why does this matter practically? Because if every effect traces to a cause, and if the primary causes in human experience are mental, then the quality of your inner life is generating your outer circumstances on a continuous loop. Your habitual thoughts are architectural blueprints. The building goes up whether you're paying attention to the plans or not. Consider how this plays out in something as simple as a conversation. You walk into a job interview carrying a specific mental state, maybe confidence, maybe dread. That state shapes your posture, your word choice, the micro-expressions flickering across your face faster than conscious thought. The interviewer responds to all of it. Their response shapes your next sentence. Your next sentence shapes their impression. By the time you walk out, an outcome has been constructed from a chain of causes that started before you opened your mouth. It started the moment you formed your first thought about the meeting. Track that same mechanism across a year, 5 years, a decade. The compounding is staggering. The Hermetic teachers distinguish between people who are moved and people who move. Most people operate as effects. Something happens to them. A comment from a co-worker, a piece of bad news, traffic on the highway, and their mental state shifts in response. That shifted state generates new causes, which produce new effects, which shift the state again. A pinball bouncing between bumpers. The trajectory looks random from the inside. From above, every bounce followed a precise mechanical sequence. The person who understands mental causation starts playing a different game. They begin choosing their mental states deliberately, which means they're selecting causes instead of merely absorbing effects. The Hermetic texts call this rising above the plane of effects to the plane of causes. The language sounds mystical, the mechanism is concrete. Here's where a skeptic would push back, and fairly. Claiming that thoughts cause external events sounds like magical thinking dressed up in old language. Where's the mechanism? How does a thought in your skull rearrange circumstances in the physical world? The honest answer, we don't have a complete causal map. We do have a partial one, and it's persuasive. Cognitive behavioral research has demonstrated for decades that thought patterns predict behavior with startling accuracy. Your beliefs about what's possible filter which opportunities you even notice, a phenomenon called selective attention. You've experienced it. Buy a red car, and suddenly every third vehicle on the road is red. They were always there. Your attention filter changed. Scale that to life decisions. A person who habitually thinks people like me don't get those opportunities will literally fail to perceive the opportunities when they appear. The door was open. Their mental state made it invisible. The effect, missing the opportunity, traces directly to a mental cause. No mysticism required. But the Hermetic principle goes further than cognitive filtering. It suggests that mental states influence external conditions through channels we don't fully understand yet. Call it the frontier zone between established psychology and something older. The Hermetic writers weren't making claims they expected to prove in a laboratory. They were describing patterns they observed across generations of practice. And some of those patterns now have research backing. Studies on expectation effects show that a doctor's belief about whether a treatment will work measurably alters patient outcomes. Even when the treatment is identical, a teacher's expectation about a student's ability changes that student's actual test scores over the course of a year. The mechanism involves hundreds of micro-behaviors, most of them unconscious. The cause is mental. The effects are physical, measurable, documented. Now multiply that across every relationship, every project, every environment you move through daily. Your mental state is broadcasting a signal continuously. People respond to that signal. Their responses create your social reality. Your social reality feeds back into your mental state. The loop closes. The Hermetic insight is that you can intervene at the point of greatest leverage, the thought itself. Most people try to change effects directly. They rearrange external conditions, new job, new city, new relationship, and wonder why the same patterns follow them. The patterns follow because the cause traveled with them. It lives in habitual thought, and habitual thought boards every plane, signs every lease, shows up on every first date. This is where mental causation becomes a practice rather than a philosophy. The Hermetic tradition emphasized disciplined attention to thought quality, monitoring the inner environment with the same seriousness you bring to monitoring a financial portfolio, because the returns compound identically. A thought held for a few seconds dissolves. A thought revisited daily for weeks becomes a belief. A belief held for months becomes a filter through which all incoming reality passes. That filter determines which causes you set in motion, which effects you experience, which thoughts arise in response. You've watched someone spend years reinforcing a victim narrative until every new event, positive or negative, gets interpreted as further evidence of persecution. The events were neutral. The mental cause assigned them meaning. The meaning generated emotional effects. The effects produced behaviors. The behaviors created new events that confirmed the original narrative. The chain runs in any direction you point it. There's a specific practice embedded in the Hermetic tradition that addresses this directly. Concentration of thought. Holding a single mental image or state with sustained focus, deliberately excluding contradictory impulses. The ancient practitioners treated this like a muscle, daily reps, increasing duration. The modern equivalent shows up in visualization research, where athletes who mentally rehearse a movement show measurable changes in the same neural regions activated during physical performance. The mental cause produced a physical effect inside the body before any external action occurred. Track the chain outward from there. Change neural patterns alter reaction times, confidence under pressure, the split-second decisions that determine whether the ball goes in or misses by an inch. A mental rehearsal 3 weeks ago is influencing a physical outcome right now. The cause and the effect are separated by time, by context, by everything that makes the connection invisible, unless you know to look for it. This is why the Hermetic tradition insists that mastery begins on the mental plane. Change the quality of your dominant thoughts, and you change the causes you're setting into motion. Change the causes and the effects reorganize around the new pattern. The timeline varies. Sometimes the shift is quick. Sometimes the old effects take months to fully work through the system, like a pipeline still delivering water from a source you redirected weeks ago. Patience with the delay is part of the practice. The people who dismiss this as wishful thinking usually make one specific error. They conflate mental causation with the idea that you can sit on a couch, think about a Ferrari, and have one materialize in the driveway. The Hermetic principle says nothing of the sort. It says your mental state is the first cause in a chain that includes action, decision, perception, and interaction with a world full of other minds running their own causal chains. The thought starts the sequence. You still walk the path. Every circumstance you're living in right now carries the fingerprint of a mental cause you set in motion last month, last year, a decade ago. Some of those causes were chosen deliberately. Most were running on autopilot, inherited patterns you absorbed before you had the awareness to question them. The Hermetic principle of cause and effect offers something specific, the understanding that autopilot is optional. The next thought you hold is already becoming a cause. The question is whether you'll choose it, or let an old pattern choose it for you. And that distinction between conscious cause and unconscious repetition is the distance between a life that feels random and one where the architecture is finally yours.